To the woman who fed me, raised me, and showed me exactly who I never want to be, a failure just like her. My daughter Vivian's cutting words hung heavy in the opulent air of The Gilded Spoon, the upscale restaurant we'd chosen for Mother's Day brunch. Her perfectly manicured hand, adorned with a sparkling diamond, held a champagne flute aloft, her smile wide and chillingly cruel. The elegant table, filled with my son-in-law Mark, my 2 grandchildren, and a few close family friends, erupted into a smattering of uncomfortable forced laughter. I sat there utterly frozen, my hands trembling ever so slightly in my lap, concealed beneath the crisp white tablecloth. At 65, I genuinely believed I was past being shocked or deeply wounded by life's unexpected turns. Clearly, I was wrong.
Mom, you look utterly shocked. Vivian purred, her voice dripping with a false saccharine concern that made my stomach churn. Did you honestly think we'd keep pretending everything was fine forever? Just then, as if on cue, the waiter arrived with our appetizers, blissfully oblivious to the palpable tension that permeated our seemingly festive gathering. I thanked him quietly the brief interaction, buying me a precious moment to compose myself to simply breathe.
Vivian, perhaps this isn't the most appropriate place, Mark began, his voice laced with a hint of unease, but she cut him off with a dismissive wave of her hand. Oh, it's the perfect place, darling. After all, Mom always cared so much about appearances. She reached into her designer handbag, a sleek, expensive accessory, and slid a cream-colored envelope across the pristine white tablecloth. It glided to a halt directly in front of my untouched plate.
Go ahead, open it, she urged, a glint of perverse amusement in her eyes as she took a slow, deliberate sip of her champagne. With fingers that felt suddenly clumsy and unsteady, I opened the envelope. Inside I found a glossy, professionally printed brochure, Sunset Gardens Assisted Living Facility. Tucked inside was an application form, my name already neatly filled out, and a bright yellow sticky note. Moving day next month. We've already paid the deposit. My throat tightened, but not from sadness. No, this was something far more potent. It was a slow, simmering rage, the kind of deep-seated anger that had been quietly building years in the making. I looked at my daughter's face, a mirror image of my own at her age, yet somehow it felt like I was staring at a stranger. When had this transformation occurred? When had my little girl, who used to snuggle into my lap during violent thunderstorms, become this cold, calculating woman who saw me as nothing more than a burden? Memories vivid and poignant flooded my mind. Working 2 demanding jobs after her father left us when she was just 7, painstakingly putting her through college, deferring my own long-cherished dreams. The quiet, profound pride I felt when she graduated from law school, a brilliant star. I raised my water glass slowly, deliberately meeting her gaze across the table. To the daughter who thinks this is the end of my story. Her triumphant smile faltered just a fraction. I could see the confusion, then a flicker of uncertainty cross her face. She had expected tears, perhaps even desperate pleading, or public humiliation. She had not expected this calm, unwavering defiance. Mom, please be reasonable, she said, her voice a little less confident now. You're living alone in that big house, forgetting things sometimes. Last month, you left the stove on. Once, I said quietly, my voice surprisingly steady. In 40 years of cooking, it happened once. It's not safe, she continued, as if I hadn't spoken clearly rehearsed. Besides, we have plans for the house. And there it was, the raw, unvarnished truth finally slipping out. This elaborate scheme wasn't about my well-being, my safety, or my memory. It was about my 4-bedroom Victorian home, nestled in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood. The home I'd poured every ounce of my energy and love into keeping after the divorce. The home where Vivian and her brother David had grown up, where laughter and tears and countless memories were etched into the very walls. The home that was now worth well over $1 million.
What plans? I asked, though a cold dread had already settled in my stomach, confirming what I suspected.
Mark cleared his throat, adjusting his tie nervously. Vivian thought we could renovate it. The kids could each have their own spacious rooms, and that lovely sunroom would make a perfect home office for me. My grandchildren, Emily and Josh, aged 10 and 12, looked profoundly uncomfortable, their eyes darting between me and their parents. They adored visiting my quirky house with its secret nooks and crannies, and the charming treehouse their grandfather had painstakingly built decades ago. I see, I said, folding the glossy brochure with deliberate precision and placing it back into the envelope. And my opinion on this doesn't matter. Vivian's eyes hardened, her earlier uncertainty replaced by a steely resolve. Mom, let's just be practical. You're getting older. Dad left you absolutely nothing when he divorced you, and you've barely saved anything for retirement. The money from the house will pay for Sunset Gardens for years. What she didn't know, what I had never told anyone, was that her father hadn't left me completely empty-handed. William might have heartlessly abandoned his family for his young secretary Melinda 25 years ago, but a lingering, insidious guilt had made him unexpectedly generous in ways Vivian could never have imagined. I think I'll skip dessert, I said, my voice cutting through the suddenly suffocating silence. I placed my napkin neatly on the table and stood up, pushing my chair back with a soft scrape. Thank you for the enlightening lunch.
Mom, don't be so dramatic. Vivian hissed, acutely aware of people at nearby tables glancing our way, their conversations hushed. Sit down, we're discussing your future. No, I said, finding a wellspring of strength in my voice that even surprised me. You're dictating my future. There's a profound difference. As I turned to leave, Vivian, acting purely on instinct, grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly tight. The appointment at Sunset Gardens is next Tuesday at 10 a.m. Richard will pick you up. I gently but firmly removed her hand. I won't be there. Mom, she called after me, her voice rising in frantic disbelief as I walked away. Mom, you're being ridiculous. What are you going to do?
I paused at the door of the restaurant, turning to look back at my daughter. This woman who had somehow become a stranger alien to me. A slight knowing smile touched my lips. Something you clearly don't expect. Outside, the bright May sunshine felt warm and comforting on my face. I took a deep, fortifying breath of the fresh air, feeling a strange, exhilarating sense of liberation. The confrontation I had dreaded and avoided for years had finally happened, and against all odds, I was still standing. I walked to my car, got in and sat quietly for a moment, letting the enormity of what had just transpired sink in. A lifetime of memories with Vivian flashed through my mind, her first wobbly steps, her triumphant high school graduation, her radiant wedding day. When had her boundless ambition twisted into such ruthless calculation? My cell phone buzzed, vibrating insistently with a flurry of text messages from Vivian. Mom, you're embarrassing yourself. We're trying to help you. This is happening whether you like it or not. With a decisive sigh, I turned off my phone and started the car. I knew exactly where I needed to go, who I needed to see. The one person who might truly understand the maelstrom of emotions I was feeling right now. The last person I ever thought I'd turn to after all these years. As I drove across town, heading toward a neighborhood I hadn't visited in over 2 decades, I mentally rehearsed what I would say when the door finally opened. Would he even recognize me? Would he care about my problems after all this time? I parked in front of a modest, well-kept bungalow and double-checked the address. This was it. William's house, my ex-husband's home. The man who had abandoned us, but who might now unexpectedly be my unlikely ally. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the doorbell, but before I could press it, the door swung open. Eleanor, William said, his eyes widening in genuine surprise. You were... I asked, momentarily thrown off balance by his unexpected appearance. Yes, he said gravely, stepping aside to let me in. It's about Vivian. There's something you need to know. Something I should have told you years ago. William gestured for me to come inside, his face etched with a newfound seriousness. I hesitated at the threshold, a wave of bittersweet memories washing over me the last time I'd stood in this very doorway, the day he had calmly told me he was leaving for Melinda, his 26-year-old secretary. The house was nothing like I'd imagined. Simple, modest, even quaint. There was no trace of the flashy, extravagant lifestyle he had seemingly chased when he abruptly left our family. Photos lined the entryway, many of Vivian and David at various ages, but also newer ones, unmistakably of our grandchildren. You've been keeping tabs on them, I said, not as a question, but as a quiet, profound realization. Coffee, he offered, leading me toward a small, surprisingly neat kitchen. He had aged, of course. His once dark hair was now completely silver, and deep lines were etched around his eyes. At 68, he looked older than his years, a little worn. What's this about Vivian? I asked, declining to sit when he pulled out a chair for me. Some old habits, it seemed, truly did die hard. I wouldn't get comfortable in William's house. He sighed heavily, a weary sound. I've been wanting to tell you this for years, but it never seemed like the right time. He opened a drawer and pulled out a worn manila folder. About 15 years ago, Vivian came to me for money. A lot of money. For what? I asked, finally taking the seat. He offered, a sense of foreboding settling over me. She said she was starting a design business, needed capital. He pushed the folder toward me. I gave her $200,000. I leafed through bank statements and a clearly notarized loan agreement. This was right after she had finished law school. Yes, but Eleanor, he continued, his voice heavy with regret. There was never any business. She used that money for her and Mark's first house, that big place in Oakwood Hills. She lied to me. I wasn't surprised that Vivian had approached her father for money. They'd maintained a relationship over the years, even if it was primarily transactional. What truly shocked me was the betrayal of him as well. There's more, William continued, his voice barely above a whisper. 3 years ago, she came back asking for another loan, for the children's education fund, she claimed. I gave her another $100,000. Let me guess, I said, a bitter understanding dawning on me. No education fund, luxury cars, and that vacation home in Lake Geneva. William's voice cracked slightly. I'm not innocent in any of this, Eleanor, I know that. When I left you and the kids, I tried to ease my crushing guilt by giving Vivian whatever she wanted. I never set boundaries, and look where it got us. Why are you telling me this now? I pressed my heart pounding with a mixture of anger and a strange cold resolve. Because she came to see me last week. He pulled out another document, its official-looking header sending a chill down my spine. She wanted me to sign this. It's a statement claiming you're mentally incompetent, that you need to be in assisted living. She said, "You've been forgetting things, becoming paranoid." My hands shook as I read the paper, its legal jargon a cruel mockery. "This is dated 3 months ago." I whispered the words, barely audible. "She's been planning this for a while, Eleanor. The nursing home, taking your house, all of it." When I refused to sign, she threatened to tell her children the real reason I left. Not the sanitized version we all agreed on, which is... William looked away, his shoulders slumped, shame evident in every line of his body. That I'd embezzled from my company to support Melinda. That I didn't just leave for another woman, but that I was almost prosecuted. "You kept quiet about it to protect the kids," I said, the memory of that painful secret resurfacing. "And I've been paying you back ever since. The secret we'd kept for 25 years, the monthly deposits into my account that Vivian never knew about. My silence bought and paid for." "Where's Melinda now?" I asked, suddenly noticing the distinct lack of a feminine presence in the modest house. "Left 10 years ago for someone younger, naturally." A hint of bitter irony tinged his voice. "Poetic justice, I suppose." I almost felt sorry for him, almost. "So what exactly is Vivian after?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer a cold certainty. "Everything, Eleanor. Your house, my remaining savings. She found out about the payments I've been making to you. She thinks I've been supporting you because you're helpless, not because it was compensation for keeping my secret." I closed the folder, the weight of its contents heavy in my hands. "And now she thinks she can force me into that nursing home, sell my house, and control whatever money you still have." "Yes, and Eleanor..." He hesitated, looking older, more frail than I'd ever seen him. "I'm dying. Cancer. 6 months, maybe less." The news should have affected me more than it did, but decades of emotional distance had dulled the immediate impact. Still, I felt a twinge of something, not quite sadness, not quite pity, but a profound regret for the wasted years. "Does Vivian know?" "Not yet, but my will..." He trailed off, his voice thick with emotion. "Let me guess," I said, a grim understanding settling over me. "You've left everything to her and David." He nodded a silent admission. "It seemed right at the time, but now knowing what she's planning..." He pulled out another document. "This is my revised will. I'm leaving half to David, who has never asked me for a penny, and half to you." "Me?" I couldn't hide my genuine surprise. "Why would you do that?" "Because I owe you, Eleanor, for everything, and because I trust you to do the right thing with it." He pushed the papers across the table. "There's about 1.5 million left. Not a fortune, but enough to ensure you'll never need to worry about a nursing home. Vivian can't touch it." My mind raced, reeling from the sudden shift in circumstances. This changed everything, and yet, in another profound way, nothing. The daughter I had raised, the child I had loved fiercely, was still trying to strip me of my dignity, my independence, my very home. "There's something else," William said quietly, his voice pulling me back to the present. "Something I found in Vivian's papers when she carelessly left them here last week." He handed me a real estate listing. My house, my home with Vivian listed as the seller. The date of listing next month. She'd already arranged to sell my house out from under me. "How could she possibly do this?" I whispered, my voice thick with disbelief and a rising fury. "I own that house outright." William slid another document across the table, a power of attorney form with what appeared to be my signature at the bottom. "This is a forgery," I whispered, staring at the remarkably convincing signature, a cold dread washing over me. "I thought it might be," William replied, his voice grim. "Notice the notary stamp. It's Mark's law partner, Jeffrey Weston." "Of course," I muttered, the pieces of the puzzle clicking into place. Richard's influence extending like a dark shadow over everything. I remembered signing something around Christmas when I'd been struggling with a particularly nasty case of shingles. Vivian had brought over some routine paperwork for the property taxes. I'd been in too much pain, too trusting to read it carefully. "I've been such a fool," I said, more to myself than to William, a bitter taste in my mouth. "We both have," he replied, his gaze meeting mine. "The question is, what do we do now?" I sat in silence for a long, agonizing moment, the full, devastating weight of Vivian's betrayal sinking deep into my soul. My own daughter. Plotting, scheming, willing to discard me like an inconvenient piece of furniture. All for what money? The house. Or was there something deeper, some festering resentment that had been simmering for years? "I need to speak with David," I said finally, my voice firming with resolve. "Does he know what his sister is planning?" "I don't think so," William answered, shaking his head. "He's been in Seattle for the past 5 years. They don't talk much. My son, always the quiet one, the peacemaker. We'd drifted apart after he moved across the country, our communication reduced to hurried holiday calls and occasional emails. But I knew in my heart he wouldn't be part of this.
Eleanor, William said, reaching across the table to touch my hand tentatively. I didn't pull away, surprising myself. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but please let me help fix this before I go. Part of me, the wounded, proud part, wanted to refuse on principle. Why should I accept help from the man who'd abandoned us so cruelly? But the practical side of me, the side that had survived raising 2 children alone, that had worked multiple jobs and stretched every dollar, knew that this was no time for pride.
All right, I said, meeting his gaze directly. But we do this my way. No confronting Vivian directly, not yet. He nodded, relief evident on his face. Whatever you need. I need a lawyer, someone not connected to Mark's firm, and I need time to think, to plan. As I stood to leave, William handed me a key. To my lake cabin about 2 hours north. Vivian doesn't know about it. You'll be safe there while we figure this out. I took the key, an unexpected lifeline, a glimmer of hope. Thank you. Eleanor, he called as I reached the door. For what it's worth, I'm truly sorry. For everything.
25 years too late, I thought, a pang of old pain. But I nodded acknowledgement all the same. Back in my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing, cycling through countless options. I couldn't go home, not now, not knowing what I knew. Vivian might be monitoring me, waiting for a reaction to her Mother's Day ambush. My phone buzzed again, more texts from Vivian. Mom, you're being childish. Call me. Mark is coming over tomorrow to discuss the paperwork. This is happening whether you want it or not. I turned the key in the ignition. A decision made, a newfound determination hardening my resolve. I needed distance clarity, and most of all, a meticulously crafted plan. Vivian thought she was dealing with a helpless, fragile old woman who would simply roll over and accept her predetermined fate. She was about to learn just how profoundly wrong she was. As I drove north toward William's secluded cabin, I made a mental list call. David, find a lawyer, secure my personal documents, access my emergency savings. The initial shock was wearing off now, replaced by a cold, focused determination. My phone rang. Vivian again. I declined the call and then on impulse pulled over at a small electronics store. 20 minutes later, I had a prepaid phone that Vivian couldn't possibly track and had turned off my regular cell. Back on the highway, a distant memory surfaced. Vivian, at 7 years old, watching me pay bills at the kitchen table. Her brow furrowed with concern, asking why I looked so worried. Sometimes adults have to make hard choices, I'd told her, my heart heavy. I'll take care of you when I grow up, Mommy. She'd promised, her little face serious, her eyes full of innocent conviction. You'll never have to worry. A bitter, humorless laugh escaped me. How life twisted innocent promises into something unrecognizable, something cruel. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple, as I turned onto the long, winding gravel road leading to William's cabin. Just as I approached the final bend, my headlights illuminated a familiar car parked near the entrance. My heart nearly stopped. A sleek black BMW. Mark's car. How had they found me? How could they possibly know about this secluded place? As I cut my engine and sat in the gathering darkness, my breath held tight in my chest. The cabin door slowly opened. A silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the warm, inviting glow from inside. Not Mark, nor Vivian, but someone I hadn't seen in years. Someone who might be my salvation, or my final undoing. Hello, Mom. My son David stood in the doorway, his tall frame silhouetted against the cabin light. I hadn't seen him in person for almost 2 years. The Seattle tech job that had seemed so promising had also regrettably created a distance between us that went far beyond mere geographic miles. David, I whispered, almost afraid he might vanish like a dream. Dad called me, he said, stepping outside and walking purposefully toward my car. He explained everything. Relief and caution warred within me. I'd always worried that David sided more with his father after the divorce, maintaining a cordial but distant relationship with me. You drove all the way from Seattle? I asked as he opened my car door, his presence a comforting anchor. Flew. Landed 3 hours ago. He helped me with my hastily packed bag, his touch gentle. Dad gave me the keys to this place years ago. I've come here sometimes to think. The cabin was warm and welcoming, permeated with the comforting scent of pine, a cheerful fire crackling in the stone fireplace. The furnishings were simple, functional, nothing extravagant, a stark contrast to the ostentatious lifestyle William had pursued after leaving us. I've made some calls, David said, gesturing for me to sit in a worn but comfortable leather armchair. Lisa is flying in tomorrow. Lisa. I hadn't heard that name in years. My daughter-in-law, or rather David's ex-wife. They'd divorced amicably 5 years ago, their careers pulling them in different directions. But I'd always cherished a special bond with Lisa. A family law attorney with a razor-sharp mind and an equally sharp tongue. She's the best lawyer I know, David explained, handing me a steaming mug of tea, the warmth seeping into my chilled hands. And she still cares about you, Mom. She was furious when I told her what Vivian is trying to pull. I cupped the warm mug in my hands, studying my son's face. At 38, he looked more like his father than ever. The same strong jawline, the same contemplative eyes. But there was a gentleness, a kindness that William had never possessed. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice firm but compassionate. "From the very beginning." So I did. I recounted the gradual distancing from Vivian. Over the years, the subtle, insidious comments about my memory, my competence. The shocking Mother's Day ambush. The nursing home brochure. Finding out about the forged power of attorney and the pending house sale. David listened without interrupting his expression, growing darker, more intense with each painful revelation. When I finished, he was silent for a long, heavy moment. "I knew Vivian had changed," he finally said, his voice low and strained. "But this is criminal. She's your sister, David, and you're my mother." He leaned forward, his voice suddenly hard and determined. "Vivian crossed a line, several lines. She's not getting away with this." The old me, the peacekeeper, the conciliator, would have tried to soften his anger to find excuses for Vivian's deplorable behavior. But that version of me seemed to have disappeared somewhere between the gilded spoon and William's house. "What's the plan?" I asked instead, my own voice surprisingly steady. David pulled out his laptop, its screen glowing in the dimly lit cabin. "First, we document everything. The forged power of attorney is our smoking gun. That's outright forgery and fraud. Lisa will help us get an injunction to immediately stop any sale of your house. Vivian has connections through Mark's firm," I reminded him, a note of caution in my voice. "So do we," David countered, a confident glint in his eyes. "Lisa's firm specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. Plus, she has no love lost for Mark." I remembered the palpable tension between them at David and Lisa's wedding. Mark making condescending remarks about little lawyers from state schools, not realizing Lisa had graduated top of her class from the same Ivy League institution as he had. "There's something else," David said, his expression softening as he reached beneath the small end table. "I found these when I was setting up the cabin for you." He handed me a small, intricately carved wooden box. I recognized it immediately, my mother's jewelry box. I'd given it to William for safekeeping during our tumultuous divorce, when my living situation was uncertain. Inside were my grandmother's delicate pearl necklace, my mother's cherished wedding ring, and several other family heirlooms I'd assumed were lost years ago. He kept them all this time. I whispered, tears pricking my eyes, as I ran my fingers over the smooth, worn wood. He said they were always yours, that he was just waiting for the right time to return them. David hesitated, his gaze meeting mine. "Mom, I know what Dad did was unforgivable, but I think he's genuinely trying to make amends now." I closed the box gently, the weight of it comforting in my hands. "Sometimes amends come too late, David." "Maybe," he acknowledged, his voice quiet, "but they still matter." We spent the next few hours strategizing our efforts, fueled by cups of hot tea and a shared sense of urgency. My teacher's organizational skills meshed seamlessly with David's technical savvy. He helped me secure my bank accounts with new complex passwords, meticulously documented the forged power of attorney, and drafted a detailed timeline of Vivian's suspicious activities. Around midnight, exhaustion finally caught up with me. David showed me to the cabin's small, cozy bedroom, promising to take the couch. "Try to get some sleep, Mom. Lisa will be here in the morning, and we'll have a lot to do." Alone in the unfamiliar room, surrounded by the comforting sounds of the crackling fire, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of the day's devastating revelations. The betrayal cut deep, a raw wound. Not just Vivian's calculated schemes, but the agonizing realization that I'd been so blind, so unwilling to see who she had truly become. Had my boundless love blinded me, or had I simply not wanted to face the painful truth? I awoke to hushed voices and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee. For a moment, disorientation gripped me before the events of the previous day came rushing back in a painful wave. Through the bedroom window, I could see a rental car had joined David's BMW. Lisa had arrived. I dressed quickly in the spare clothes I'd hastily packed, and emerged to find my former daughter-in-law bent over a stack of legal documents at the dining table. At 40, Lisa Chen was still striking her sleek black hair, now sporting a few elegant silver strands, her keen eyes missing absolutely nothing. "Eleanor," she said warmly, rising immediately to embrace me. "I've missed you. It's been far too long." "It has," I agreed, returning her hug with genuine affection. The divorce had been Lisa and David's mutual decision, their demanding careers pulling them in different directions, but losing regular contact with Lisa had been a private sorrow of mine. "I hear your daughter is trying to pull some seriously shady business," Lisa said, getting straight to the point. As always, her voice crisp and efficient. "Let me assure you, we're not going to let that happen." David poured me a comforting cup of coffee as Lisa laid out her initial assessment. "The power of attorney is clearly forged, and we can prove it with a handwriting analysis." The fact that Mark's partner notarized it makes this even more serious. That's an ethics violation that could threaten his bar license.
What about my house? I asked, my voice tinged with anxiety. I've already filed an emergency injunction to prevent any sale. Lisa said, her gaze steady. But we need to move quickly. Based on what David told me, Vivian and Mark are planning to move forward regardless of your wishes. My new prepaid phone buzzed with a text from David's phone. He'd been monitoring my regular cell phone remotely.
Vivian's called you 17 times since yesterday, he reported, and left 6 messages. The last one says they're filing a missing persons report if they don't hear from you by noon.
Let them, Lisa said with a hint of grim satisfaction. That actually works in our favor. When you show up safe and sound with legal representation, it makes them look either incompetent or blatantly manipulative. The cabin door opened, and William entered carrying grocery bags overflowing with fresh provisions. He nodded awkwardly to David and Lisa before addressing me.
How are you holding up, Eleanor? Better than expected, I admitted. The raw, stinging anger was still there, but it had transformed into something more focused, more purposeful. I've been thinking, William said, setting down the bags, his brow furrowed in thought. About the money I've been paying you all these years.
Dad, maybe now isn't the time.
David began a note of caution in his voice, but I gestured for him to wait. What about it, William?
We've always called it maintenance, but legally it's been more of a private arrangement, nothing court-ordered. He glanced at Lisa, a question in his eyes. Would it be possible to reclassify those payments, make them official somehow? Backdated? Lisa's eyes narrowed thoughtfully, a flicker of professional interest in their depths.
What are you thinking? If those payments were officially part of a divorce settlement, William explained, his voice gaining confidence, they'd be much harder for Vivian to challenge, right? And they'd establish a long history of financial support that directly contradicts her claim that Eleanor is destitute and needs her house sold.
Lisa's expression shifted, a newfound respect dawning on her face.
That's actually quite smart. We'd need to file an amended divorce decree, but given that both parties consent, it's completely doable. I studied my ex-husband. This man I'd once loved, then fiercely hated, and now viewed with a complicated mix of resignation and grudging gratitude. Why are you really doing this, William? He met my gaze directly, his eyes clear and unblinking. Because it's right. Because I owe you Eleanor. And because Vivian needs to learn that there are consequences to manipulation and deceit. A lesson I should have taught her long ago. The 4 of us worked tirelessly through the morning building our strategy piece by painstaking piece. Lisa's sharp legal expertise, David's invaluable technological skills, William's financial resources, and my own intimate, painful knowledge of Vivian's patterns and motivations, all combining into something formidable, something unstoppable. Around noon, Lisa's phone chimed with an incoming call. Her expression turned serious as she listened, then she put it on speaker. "Hello, Lisa Chen," she said formally, her voice composed.
"This is Mark Harmon," came the smooth, confident voice I recognized as my son-in-law's. "I understand you filed some kind of injunction regarding property belonging to my mother-in-law."
"That's correct," Lisa replied coolly, her voice unwavering. "I'm representing Eleanor Wilson in this matter. All communication regarding this should go through me from now on."
A pause heavy with unspoken tension. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My wife and I are simply trying to help Eleanor transition to assisted living. She's been having episodes memory issues. We're concerned about her safety." His voice was perfectly modulated, filled with feigned concern.
"Interesting," Lisa said, a hint of steel in her tone. "And does helping her typically involve forging her signature on a power of attorney and listing her house for sale without her knowledge?" Another, much longer pause. "I don't know what Eleanor has told you, but I assure you, everything we've done has been with her best interests in mind." "Then you won't mind explaining that to the judge at our emergency hearing tomorrow morning?" Lisa cut in, her voice sharp and decisive. "Oh, and to the Bar Association Ethics Committee when I file my complaint about your partner's notarization of falsified documents." Mark's tone shifted, hardening perceptibly. "You're making a serious mistake, Lisa. Vivian and I are trying to protect Eleanor from herself. If you're enabling her delusions, save it for court, Mark." Lisa cut in, her patience clearly at an end. "And let Vivian know that her mother is perfectly fine, just not where you can manipulate and defraud her." She ended the call and looked at me, a triumphant glint in her eyes. "They'll try to paint you as confused, possibly even mentally compromised. We need to be ready for that."
"I've already scheduled an independent cognitive assessment for tomorrow morning before the hearing," David said, his voice calm and reassuring. "The doctor is a specialist who frequently testifies in elder law cases." I felt a strange, potent mix of emotions. Anxiety about the imminent confrontation, a burning anger at Vivian's calculated betrayal, but most surprisingly, a growing sense of exhilarating excitement. For the first time in years, perhaps even decades, I wasn't just reacting to life's relentless challenges. I was taking control.
There's something else we should consider, I said, an idea sharp and clear taking shape in my mind. Vivian doesn't know about William's cancer diagnosis or his revised will.
No.
William confirmed, his gaze meeting mine. And she doesn't know about the documentation I've meticulously kept of her false loan requests either. We could use that, I suggested, not as our first move, but as leverage if needed. Lisa looked impressed, a slight smile touching her lips. You're thinking strategically, Eleanor. Good.
David's laptop chimed with an alert. A sudden, sharp sound. His expression darkened as he read the screen. What is it? I asked, my heart beginning to pound.
They've escalated, he said grimly. Vivian just had the utilities shut off at your house and changed the locks. They're moving faster than we anticipated.
Can they do that? I asked Lisa, incredulous.
Not legally, no, she replied, her voice firm. But they're trying to create a fait accompli, a done deal. We need to move now, then, I declared, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me, before they can do any more damage. Agreed, Lisa said, gathering her documents with swift, decisive movements. Eleanor, are you ready for this? It's going to get ugly before it gets better. I thought of Vivian's cold, triumphant smile at that Mother's Day lunch, of her dismissive, wounding words, a failure just like her. I thought of the decades I'd spent supporting her, believing in her, loving her fiercely despite her growing ambition and chilling materialism. Yes, I said, straightening my shoulders, a newfound resolve burning in my eyes. I'm more than ready. As we prepared to leave the cabin, David pulled me aside, his face serious. Mom, there's something else you should know. Something Dad didn't tell you.
My heart sank, a familiar dread creeping in. What is it?
It's about Vivian's husband, Mark. Dad found something while looking through their loan documents. David hesitated, his gaze unwavering. Tax records showing that Mark's law firm is in serious financial trouble. They've been hiding assets, taking out massive loans. I think Vivian isn't just being greedy, Mom. She's desperate. Desperate enough to destroy her own mother, I asked, the hurt still raw and fresh. Desperate people justify terrible things, David said quietly, his voice filled with a poignant sadness. It doesn't excuse what she's doing, but it might explain it. As we drove away from the cabin, I watched the peaceful lake recede in the side mirror, its calm waters a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. Ahead lay confrontation, painful truths, and the final devastating unraveling of my relationship with my daughter. But for the first time in years, I felt a profound sense of purpose and exhilarating clarity. Vivian had raised her glass to my perceived failure, not realizing her cruel words would become the unlikely catalyst for my reclamation, my rebirth. She thought she was writing the final tragic chapter of my story. She was about to discover it was merely the thrilling beginning of a brand new one. The courthouse steps seemed steeper than I remembered from my teaching days, when I'd occasionally been called to testify in mundane family court matters. Lisa walked confidently beside me, her crisp navy suit and powerful stride, a sharp contrast to my more casual though dignified attire. David and William followed a few steps behind, an unlikely yet incredibly effective alliance forged by necessity. Remember, Lisa whispered as we approached the imposing entrance, her voice low and reassuring. Let me do most of the talking. Judge Martinez knows me, and she has a reputation for being tough but fair, especially in elder abuse cases.
Elder abuse. The term still shocked me, sending a shiver down my spine. In my mind, elder abuse happened to frail, isolated seniors without family, not to relatively healthy 65-year-olds with 2 adult children and loving grandkids. But as Lisa had patiently explained during our meticulous preparation, financial exploitation by family members was actually one of the most common and insidious forms of elder abuse. We'd arrived early, hoping to avoid a confrontation before the hearing, but as we entered the grand courthouse lobby, I saw them. Vivian and Mark, heads bent together in hushed conversation with a distinguished-looking older man I immediately recognized as Jeffrey Weston Mark's law partner and, chillingly, the notary on the forged power of attorney. Vivian noticed us first. Her perfectly composed, almost serene expression flickered momentarily with genuine surprise before settling into something harder, more guarded. She nudged Mark, who straightened his tie with a practiced, confident gesture. "Mom," Vivian called out, her voice carrying across the cavernous marble floor, a theatrical blend of relief and concern. "Thank God you're all right. We've been worried sick." She strode purposefully toward me, her arms outstretched as if for a loving embrace, a performance for any casual observers. I stood my ground, my feet planted firmly, making no move to meet her halfway. "Save the theatrics, Vivian," I said quietly, my voice devoid of emotion. "They won't work anymore." Her arms fell slowly to her sides, her carefully constructed mask slipping just enough to reveal the cold calculation beneath. "What's going on, Dad, David? What are you both doing here?" Her eyes narrowed dangerously as she fixed on Lisa. "And why is she involved?" "Ms. Wilson has retained me as her attorney," Lisa stated formally, her voice clear and authoritative. "All communication regarding this matter should go through me from now on." Mark stepped forward, his handsome face arranged in an expression of concerned confusion. Eleanor, there seems to be some profound misunderstanding. My wife and I are only trying to help you. The house is simply too much for you to manage alone, and the equity would generously secure your care for years. The only misunderstanding, I replied evenly, meeting his gaze directly, is your belief that I would allow my own daughter to steal my home and lock me away. Vivian flushed a faint crimson spreading across her cheeks, and she glanced around nervously at nearby people who had begun to take notice of our increasingly heated confrontation. Mom, you're confused. Remember how you left the stove on, how you got lost driving to the grocery store last month? I wasn't lost, Vivian, I countered, my voice firm. I decided to take a different route to avoid construction. She's been doing this for months, Vivian said to no one in particular, her voice rising theatrically, a desperate performance. Making excuses covering for memory lapses. It's why we've been so worried. That's enough, Lisa cut in sharply, her voice cutting through Vivian's dramatic monologue. Save your performance for the judge, though I should warn you, Judge Martinez has seen every trick in the book when it comes to family members trying to seize assets under the guise of concern. Mark placed a restraining hand on Vivian's arm, murmuring something in her ear. Her face hardened as she looked from me to William. So this is how it's going to be. You're all ganging up against me when I'm just trying to protect Mom's future. No, Vivian, I said, finding an undeniable strength in the truth. You're trying to protect your future at my expense. The house, the power of attorney, the nursing home, it was never about my welfare. Her eyes flashed dangerously, a spark of fury igniting. You have no idea what you're talking about. Actually, I do, I countered, my voice gaining power. I know about the financial trouble Mark's firm is in. I know about the loans you took from your father under false pretenses. I know you've already listed my house for sale without my knowledge or consent. Shock registered on her face swiftly, followed by a furious red flush as she whirled on William. You had no right to share that information. He had every right. David interjected, his voice quiet but firm. Just as Mom has every right to defend herself against your schemes. Before Vivian could respond, a bailiff called our case number. As we turned toward the courtroom, I caught a fleeting glimpse of uncertainty on my daughter's face. The first crack in her confident, unyielding facade. Inside the courtroom, Judge Martinez, a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair, surveyed all parties with shrewd, discerning eyes. After the initial formalities, Lisa presented our case succinctly: the forged power of attorney, the unauthorized house listing the clear pattern of Vivian undermining my independence and autonomy. When it was Mark's turn to speak for their side, he adopted a tone of carefully crafted reasonable concern. Your Honor, we understand how this might appear, but we've been increasingly worried about Mrs. Wilson's cognitive state. The power of attorney was prepared as a precautionary measure with her best interests at heart. And was Mrs. Wilson physically present when this document was notarized? Judge Martinez asked, peering over her reading glasses, her voice crisp. Mark hesitated just long enough for the silence to stretch uncomfortably. She was indisposed that day, Your Honor, suffering from shingles. But she had verbally agreed to the arrangement. The judge's expression darkened, her gaze fixed on Mark. Mr. Harmon, are you suggesting that Mr. Weston notarized a document without the signatory present? Jeffrey Weston shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his face pale as Mark fumbled for a coherent response. I have here. Lisa interjected, her voice clear and precise. Mrs. Wilson's medical records from that day showing she was indeed suffering from shingles and had been prescribed significant pain medication. I also have the results of a comprehensive cognitive assessment performed yesterday, confirming that Mrs. Wilson is fully competent and shows no signs of cognitive impairment. Judge Martinez reviewed the documents carefully, her expression unreadable before turning her gaze to Vivian. Ms. Harmon, would you care to explain why you took it upon yourself to list your mother's home for sale without her knowledge? Vivian straightened, smoothing her expression into one of dutiful daughterly concern. Your Honor, my mother has been showing signs of financial instability. The house requires significant maintenance she can't manage. We believed the best course of action was to help transition her to assisted living, where she would be safe and properly cared for. And the proceeds from the house sale, the judge pressed, her voice sharp, would be held in trust for her care, Vivian replied smoothly, her voice confident. With you as trustee, I presume. As her daughter, it seemed appropriate. Judge Martinez set down her pen and folded her hands on the bench, her gaze piercing. Mrs. Wilson, would you like to respond to your daughter's assessment of your situation? All eyes in the courtroom turned to me. I stood, my hands steady, my voice clear and unwavering. Your Honor, I have lived independently and managed my finances successfully for over 25 years since my divorce. I am retired but financially secure. My home is paid for. I have savings and I receive both a teacher's pension and regular support payments from my ex-husband.
I am neither incapable nor destitute. I paused, looking directly at Vivian, my voice filled with a quiet strength. My daughter's actions were not motivated by concern for my welfare, but by her own financial interests. She and her husband took steps to seize control of my assets without my knowledge or consent, using a forged document to do so. The hearing continued for another intense hour, with financial records presented, testimonies given. William confirmed the payments he'd been making to me for years, now officially documented as part of an amended divorce settlement. The medical specialist unequivocally testified to my cognitive health. David provided irrefutable evidence of the unauthorized changes to my house locks and utilities. Throughout it all, I watched Vivian's expression shift from confident and composed to increasingly concerned, then to something close to desperate panic as the mounting weight of evidence crushed against her. Mark maintained his composure better, his legal training evident, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed his growing, sickening awareness that their meticulously crafted plan was utterly unraveling. When Judge Martinez finally delivered her ruling, her words fell like heavy hammer blows, each one echoing with undeniable authority. The court finds clear evidence of attempted financial exploitation. The power of attorney is hereby invalidated. An injunction is granted permanently preventing any sale of Mrs. Wilson's property without her explicit verified consent. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges of forgery and fraud, as well as to the State Bar Association for ethics violations related to the improper notarization. She fixed Vivian and Mark with a stern, unyielding look. You should both consider yourselves fortunate that Mrs. Wilson has not pressed for immediate prosecution. As we rose at the judge's dismissal, I caught Vivian's eye across the courtroom. The confident, calculating daughter who had audaciously raised a toast to my failure was gone, replaced by a woman whose carefully constructed world was visibly crumbling around her. Outside in the bustling corridor, Lisa squeezed my arm supportively. Phase 1 complete. You did wonderfully, Eleanor. What now? I asked, feeling strangely hollow despite our resounding victory. Now, David said, his voice quiet. We go home and make sure they haven't done any permanent damage. Home. The word carried both deep comfort and a lingering unease. The locks were changed, the utilities shut off, and more importantly, the sanctuary I'd so carefully created for myself had been brutally violated by my own daughter's profound betrayal. As we walked toward the exit, a voice, hesitant and a little hoarse, called out behind us. Mom, wait! I turned to see Vivian hurrying after us alone. Mark was nowhere in sight, undoubtedly already consulting with a new attorney. Her designer suit was slightly rumpled now, her once perfect hair coming loose from its elaborate style. For a fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of vulnerability in her eyes, a flash of genuine fear that reminded me with a pang of the little girl she'd once been. Please, she said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone, now edged with desperation. We need to talk. I glanced at Lisa, who nodded subtly. We'll wait by the car, she said, gently guiding David and William toward the exit. When we were finally alone in the corridor, Vivian and I moved to a quiet alcove near a large window. The late afternoon sun cast long, dramatic shadows across the polished marble floor. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Mark's gone to call our attorney, she finally said, her eyes not quite meeting mine, fixed instead on the distant city skyline. I thought Jeffrey Weston was your attorney, I countered, my voice flat. Not anymore. She smoothed her skirt, a nervous gesture I recognized from her childhood. He's terrified of being disbarred over the notarization issue. He's withdrawn from the case. I studied my daughter's face, this person who had been so willing to strip me of my dignity, my independence, my very home. The anger was still there, simmering fiercely beneath the surface. But now it was strangely mingled with something unexpected, a profound pity. Why, Vivian? I asked simply, my voice gentle but firm. She flinched at the directness of the question. You wouldn't understand. Try me. She sighed, a weary sound, leaning heavily against the window ledge. Mark's firm is in trouble, deep trouble. Bad investments, a few cases that went sideways. We've been desperately keeping up appearances, but we're drowning in debt. So you decided to solve your problems by taking my house. I pressed, my voice devoid of accusation, simply stating a painful fact. By forcing me into a nursing home. It wasn't like that, not at first. A hint of defiance crept back into her voice, a flicker of her old self. We really were concerned about you living alone. The plan was for you to move in with us temporarily while we renovated the house, then sell it at a profit. The nursing home idea came later, when you started pushing back. When I refused to be a convenient solution to your financial problems, I corrected, my gaze unwavering. Vivian's shoulders slumped. You make it sound so calculated. Wasn't it? It was survival, she countered, her voice raw. Do you have any idea what it's like watching everything you've painstakingly built crumble around you? The firm, our reputation, the children's private school tuitions. Actually, I do, I said quietly, the memory a sharp, vivid pang. When your father left us with nothing but debts and broken promises I had to rebuild from scratch. I worked 2 jobs, clipped coupons, patched clothes instead of buying new ones. Also, you and David could have opportunities.
That was different, she argued weakly.
How? I challenged, my voice remaining level, but the words cutting deep. Because you have designer tastes and country club memberships to maintain, I made sacrifices for my children. You were willing to sacrifice your mother.
Vivian had no answer for that. She stared out the window at the bustling courthouse square below, where ordinary people went about their lives facing their own private struggles.
What happens now? She finally asked, her voice small.
That depends on you, I replied, my gaze softening slightly. The judge has referred the case for potential criminal charges. Lisa believes we have enough evidence for a conviction. Fear flickered across Vivian's face, raw and undisguised. You'd do that, send your own daughter to jail?
The old me, the peacekeeper, the self-sacrificing mother, would have backed down immediately, recoiling from the thought. But that woman had definitively disappeared somewhere between the Mother's Day toast and the courtroom battle. I don't want to, I said honestly, meeting her terrified gaze. But I will if I have to. The question is whether you're willing to take responsibility for your actions. What does that mean exactly? She asked, her voice barely a whisper.
It means acknowledging what you did, making amends, accepting consequences. She laughed bitterly, a harsh, humorless sound. And what would those consequences be?
For starters, a formal apology. To me, to your father, to your brother. Then returning the money you took from your father under false pretenses. Finally seeking help, financial counseling at a minimum, therapy if you're willing.
You want me to go to therapy? She sounded incredulous, offended.
I want you to understand why you thought it was acceptable to destroy your mother's life to maintain your lifestyle.
Vivian pushed off from the window ledge, beginning to pace the small alcove restlessly.
And if I agree to all this, the criminal charges go away.
I'll ask Lisa to pursue a civil resolution instead, I confirmed. But Vivian, this isn't just about avoiding jail time. This is about whether we have any relationship going forward.
She stopped pacing, something vulnerable and raw crossing her face. What does that mean?
It means I'll always be your mother. But trust has been profoundly broken. Rebuilding it will take time and genuine effort on your part.
And if I don't agree?
Then we proceed with the criminal charges, and you face the consequences of your actions through the legal system.
Vivian was silent for a long moment, the weight of the choice before her visible in her slumped posture, the defeated slump of her shoulders. I waited patiently, giving her the space to make her own difficult decision. What about Mark? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. What about him? He was part of this too.
Yes, he was, I acknowledged. His choices are his own, as are yours. Something shifted in her expression, a profound realization, perhaps, that she was standing at a crossroads, utterly alone.
I need to think,
she said, straightening her shoulders, a spark of defiance still present.
Take all the time you need, I replied, moving toward the corridor. I'll be at home, my home, when you're ready to talk again.
3 months passed. The utilities were reconnected, the locks changed back.
My life gradually slowly returned to a semblance of normal, though normal had taken on a new, more profound meaning. William's cancer treatment had begun with mixed results. The prognosis remained grim, but he faced it with a quiet dignity I wouldn't have expected from the man who'd abandoned his family decades ago. David visited regularly from Seattle, rebuilding our relationship, one honest conversation at a time. As for Vivian, she'd made her choice. The day after the hearing, Mark had wanted to fight the charges to take his chances in court. Vivian had chosen differently. The apology came first, stiff and formal initially, but becoming more genuine, more heartfelt as she spoke, tears welling in her eyes. The financial restitution to William followed along with her agreement to attend counseling, both for her financial decisions and for the deeper unresolved issues that had led to her deplorable behavior. Mark had filed for divorce a week later, unwilling to accept the path of accountability Vivian had chosen. His law firm was under intense investigation, his career in shambles. The grandchildren. Emily and Josh spent weekends with me, now their laughter filling my house once more, while Vivian worked tirelessly to rebuild her life, taking a position at a small legal aid office, a far cry from the prestigious corporate law she'd practiced before.
Today, she was coming for tea, a Sunday tradition we'd established during her arduous journey toward amends. Our relationship remained fragile, measured in small, tentative moments of reconnection, rather than the easy closeness we'd once shared. Trust, I had learned, was a delicate seedling that required constant, careful tending.
The doorbell rang precisely at 3. Vivian, ever punctual, stood on my porch holding a small package and a manila envelope. "Hi, Mom," she said, the greeting still carrying a trace of awkwardness, a lingering shyness. "I brought scones from that bakery you like." "Come in," I replied, accepting the package, the scent of warm berries filling the air. "The kettle's just boiled." In the kitchen, she watched as I arranged the scones on a plate, her eyes taking in the subtle personal changes I'd made to the house, new curtains, a different arrangement of furniture. Small, quiet assertions of my continuing independence. "How's Dad?" she asked, accepting the cup of tea I offered. "About the same," I replied, my voice gentle. "The treatments are difficult, but he's determined." I didn't elaborate on the growing, unexpected friendship that had blossomed between William and me. Not romance, but a kind of peaceful understanding neither of us had anticipated finding. Vivian nodded, turning the envelope nervously in her hands. "I have something for you, from the counseling." She slid the envelope across the table, an echo of that Mother's Day lunch that seemed both painfully recent and distantly far away. Inside was a letter, handwritten on several pages. "It's everything I couldn't say out loud," she explained, her voice soft and vulnerable. "About why I did what I did. About the person I became without even realizing it. Dr. Sanderson suggested I write it all down." I set the letter aside for later understanding its profound importance, but unwilling to shift the moment into heavier territory. "Thank you, I'll read it after you leave." "There's something else," she said, her voice steadier now, infused with a newfound hope. "I've been offered a position with the Elder Law Clinic. It's a huge pay cut from corporate law, but it feels right. Using my legal knowledge to prevent what I almost did to you." Pride, unexpected and warm, bloomed in my chest, filling me with a quiet joy. That's wonderful, Vivian." "Is it?" Uncertainty still clouded her features, a lingering doubt. "After everything, redemption isn't about erasing the past," I said, finding wisdom in words I hadn't planned, words that simply flowed from my heart. "It's about creating a different future." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, a raw vulnerability I hadn't seen in years. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "Probably not," I agreed with gentle, unwavering honesty. "But you're working to earn it, and that matters." We sipped our tea in a silence that felt, if not comfortable, at least far less strained than before. "The kids miss the treehouse," she said eventually, a small tentative smile touching her lips. "They were wondering if they could come over next weekend to play in it." "I'd like that," I replied, a genuine smile spreading across my face. The grandchildren had been cautious around me at first, confused by the family turmoil. But gradually they'd relaxed, returning to the easy affection we'd always shared. As Vivian prepared to leave, she paused in the doorway. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "That day at the restaurant when I gave you the nursing home brochure, you said, 'To the daughter who thinks this is the end of my story.' You seemed so certain even then. How did you know you'd find a way through?" I considered the question, reflecting on the woman I'd been before that pivotal moment. Competent, yes, but perhaps a little complacent. Loving, but perhaps too willing to be taken advantage of. I admitted, a soft, knowing smile on my lips. But I knew I wasn't finished yet. After Vivian left, I sat on the porch swing, the gentle afternoon breeze rustling through the leaves, and opened her letter. The pages contained raw, painful truths about her deep-seated resentment of the sacrifices I'd made after the divorce, her terror of financial insecurity after witnessing my struggles, her fierce determination to never be vulnerable the way she perceived I had been. Beneath the calculated actions was a wounded child who had tragically learned the wrong lessons from watching her mother's resilience. Understanding didn't erase the harm done, but it created an essential space for healing. I folded the letter carefully and went inside to call David, then William, making plans for a family dinner the following weekend. Not a full reconciliation, not yet, but a hopeful beginning. That evening, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was different from the one who'd sat shocked and silent at that Mother's Day lunch. Stronger, clearer-eyed, unwilling to be diminished. Vivian's cruel toast had been meant to end my story, to write me off as a failure, an inconvenient obstacle to her carefully laid plans. Instead, it had become the unexpected catalyst for my reclamation. Of my home, my independence, my very sense of self-worth. I thought of the nursing home brochure, now a distant, faded memory. My story wasn't ending. It was gloriously evolving. The future stretched before me, uncertain, but undeniably mine to shape. Tomorrow I would call Lisa about the community legal clinic, where I'd been volunteering, sharing my experience with other older adults facing similar challenges. Next week, I'd meet with the real estate agent about the small rental property I was considering as an investment. The following month, a weekend trip to Seattle to visit David. My last move hadn't been about revenge or punishment. It had been about reclaiming my power, asserting my boundaries, and showing Vivian, and everyone else, that I was not to be underestimated. To the daughter who had thought it was the end of my story, it was merely the beginning of a vibrant new chapter. One written entirely in my own resilient hand. A valuable lesson. The power of self-reclamation. This story powerfully illustrates that it's never too late to reclaim your agency and redefine your narrative. Eleanor, despite facing profound betrayal and emotional manipulation from her own daughter, refused to be a victim. She chose to fight for her dignity, her home, and her independence. This tale teaches us several crucial lessons. Trust, but verify.
Even with those closest to us, it's vital to remain vigilant, especially when it comes to legal and financial matters. Eleanor's trusting nature was exploited a painful reminder to always read documents carefully and seek independent advice. Boundaries are essential. William's guilt-driven generosity, without clear boundaries, contributed to Vivian's entitlement. Setting healthy boundaries, even with loved ones, is crucial for respectful relationships. The power of an ally. Eleanor's ability to reach out to her son and, surprisingly, her ex-husband proved vital. Having a strong support system can make all the difference in overcoming difficult challenges. Redemption is a journey, not a destination. Vivian's path to amends is shown as a long, arduous process, not an instant fix. Genuine change requires self-reflection, accountability, and consistent effort. Your story is yours to write. No one has the right to dictate your future or define your worth. Eleanor's journey of self-reclamation highlights the empowering truth that you are the author of your own life, capable of turning even the darkest chapters into beginnings. What are your thoughts on Eleanor's journey? Have you ever had to fight to reclaim your own narrative? Share your insights in the comments below. Don't forget to like this story and subscribe for more compelling narratives and life lessons.